Oh, what's going on, GameLeap? But this is the Jizz, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about the 10 most underrated champions for the new 12.3 patch. And these are typically champions who are picked nowhere near as much as they should be for how broken they actually are. So by the end of today's video, you will know the most underrated champions for 12.3 and the roles you need to play these champions in. So make sure you stick around for the whole video. And as always, make sure you check out the links in the description and comment section to the GameLeap website for all the League of Legends learning resources you need that are made and designed by challenger players to help you become the best player you can possibly be on the Rift. So check those out and let's get into the countdown. And coming in at number 10, we have one champion who was buffed in 12.2, but his pick rate is only around 1%, and this is Veigar in the mid lane. And for Veigar in 12.2, what happened was that your Q's cooldown was reduced by a second at each rank. Now for an ability that you do max first, this means that at level 9, your Q is on a 4-second cooldown, and there was another buff that came in, so from large minions and monsters, so from cannon minions and super minions, the stacks you're getting increased by 1 as well. This just accelerates your scaling, and because you can just press R in the late game and pretty much win games. And I think it's also a really good pick for solo queue because most people are probably going to pick assassins or close range champions, and to be honest, in lower elos I don't think the range concept really exists because lots of people like to play on headbutt only mode, which is really what you want for Veigar because of your cage and your short range abilities. This makes him a very deadly pick, but I would be careful picking Veigar if the enemy mid laner in particular is a long range champion because you really can't do much. But still, generally speaking, for Veigar in the mid lane to have around a 52-53% win rate across the board, it speaks volumes to how good this champion is at the moment, so play the purple mage in the mid lane in 12.3. But being Veigar to number 9 on the countdown is a champion typically played in the top lane, but playing Gwen in the jungle might even reap a bigger reward, and we saw Canyon play this in the LCK recently and kill the jungler of T1 at level 2. And if we think about the champions you're going to play against in the jungle as Gwen, most of these are short range champions. This is what you thrive on because you can actually access these champions and deal damage to them with your Q, and of course hit them with more regularity when it comes to your ultimate. So not only are you one of the strongest duelers in the jungle, but you also scale like an absolute beast. And once you get to your Nash's Tooth, Riftmaker, these items are just too good on Gwen because they mean your clear is insane and they also mean your fighting. This is also right up there. And if you are going to play Gwen in the jungle, I'd highly recommend running Ghost as your summoner spell with Smite, of course, because it gives you a lot more stickiness than running Flash. Flash might be useful in some situations, but the movement speed and the scaling you get from the movement speed from Ghost is just way more useful and consistent for a champion like Gwen because you want to be able to stick to the enemy champions for as long as possible. Those extended fights, that's what you're about. But ahead of Gwen coming in at number 8 on this countdown, this is another top laner, but to be honest, is probably better played in the mid lane, and this is Singed. And no doubt, mid Singed is well known by now, but still, he's not picked nearly enough for how broken he actually is. So really the build, what it revolves around is running Predator as your keystone, because when you play Singed in the mid lane, it's all about roaming around the map and your playmaking potential. We're not really there to win lane, of course you can, but we're there to influence the map. This is why you want to be running Celerity and Water Walking in your secondary tree, and also taking Boots of Speed as your first item with a refillable potion, because then we can actually use the Predator from our boots as soon as we can. So when that Scuttlecrab fight rolls around, or if you want to actually set up a gank for your jungler, you can press that Predator key, run at the enemy mid lane, and it's a pretty much guaranteed kill. So the kill threat is very, very high in the early game, and once you do get snowballing, there is really no stopping you. And it's also a good idea to take Flash and Ignite because this increases your kill threat, because that Flash Fling when your jungler is nearby, the threat is just way too high for the enemy mid laner to deal with. And what's also good here is going Sorcerer's Shoes and then Demonic Embrace. So Sorcerer's Shoes, of course, for the movement speed and the magic penetration, and Demonic Embrace because thankfully now it has the passive where it's converting all of that HP you'll get from Demonic and your future items into AP. The burn is really good as well. So it's really a match made in heaven at the moment for Singed in the mid lane, but nowhere near enough players are actually abusing it, so make sure you do in 12.3 to print LP. But coming in at number 7 on this countdown, guys, beating Singed to this spot, this is Ezreal in the AD carry role. And you might be like, why is Ezreal coming in as underrated? Because there are no buffs or nerfs directly to Ezreal in 12.3. Well, that's the thing. There are indirect buffs coming into Ezreal, and that's because lots of the bruiser items you might consider building are getting buffed. So if we think of Divine Sundra, now I'm not saying you're going to build Divine Sundra in every game, but the AD is going up, and it's also building out of Caulfield's Warhammer, which is better because it's giving you ability haste rather than phage. This means you can spam more spells, keep your passive stacked. It's just a very important stat for Ezreal, so this is definitely a bonus. And we can also think about the new Death's Dance, so even though it's costing 3,300 gold, it's blocking physical and magic damage, and it's also going to be scaling the heal off your bonus AD, not your max HP. So this is also another item we could consider going, and we also have Ravenous Hydra, so for the same amount of gold, you're getting 5 extra AD. Remember, that's getting converted into Death's Dance's new healing passive, and this means your auto attacks knockdown abilities, of course, are going to hit harder. And we also have to consider more of Malmortius, which is also getting buffed. So the AD is going up by 5. The haste, likewise, is going up by 5. And the shield, when it actually procs, is giving you 12% Omnivamp. Now, even though it's only 70% effective for ranged champions, it is scaling off your bonus AD. So this AD increase from Maul, Ravenous Hydra, Death's Dance, even Divine Sundra, these are all going to come into play here in the Omnivamp because you are spamming a lot of spells. You will be healing for so much as well in the late game when you do get this item. So there are lots of possibilities for Ezreal here, guys. Now, we just talked about Singed in the mid lane, guys, but the good news, if you don't want to play Singed in the mid lane, I have another champion for you here who pretty much does exactly the same thing, but to be honest, is probably more reliable. And this is Rumble in the mid lane, who has really fallen out of favor in the top lane and in the jungle because the attack speed nerf to your passive at the end of last season, but still Rumble with Electrocute in the early game is still an absolute menace to deal with because the wave clear is insane, the roaming potential is very hard to deal with, and if you are a close range champion in particular, getting close to a Rumble is one of the worst decisions you can do. Now, a bit like Veigar, we don't really want to be blind picking Rumble because if someone knows we are in the mid lane, a ranged champion can really make our lives difficult. But the good thing is lots of people, like I said for Veigar, are going to be picking close range champions in solo queue. This is where Rumble can really pop off and absolutely dominate in the mid lane, and the playstyle is a bit like Singe. We want to be shoving as many ways as possible and then moving around the map. Because even though we can win the 1v1, we're all about those skirmishes and team fighting because of our amazing ultimate and area of effect damage. And a bit like Singe, to make sure we really win the mid lane, especially because of the teleport nerfs at the start of Season 12, we want to be taking Flash and Ignite as our summoner spells because this just increases our kill pressure and hopefully gets the snowball going so we can end games by the 20-minute mark. But ahead of Rumble, guys, starting off the top 5 in this countdown, this is another mid laner, but this one is much better played in the top lane at the moment, and this is Cassiopeia. And even next patch with Death's Dance blocking magical damage, this isn't really going to come into effect until the late game, by which point the laning phase is already over, and hopefully, or what you should have, is a massive lead at this point anyway. And if we think about Cassiopeia and what's going for at the moment, well, thankfully the Conqueror stacking is staying at 5 seconds for 12.3, and if we also think about Archangel Staff, so this costing 2600 gold now, and giving you ability haste, AP might be the more valuable stat, but it's still very useful. This reduces the cooldown of your W and your ultimate, which do have longish cooldowns, so this means when those teamfights start happening on a regular basis, you will have your Petrify and Gaze up pretty much all the time. And what's also good for Cassiopeia is that Rylai's Crystal Scepter buff recently, so it's only costing 2600 gold. This is a 400 gold decrease, and even though you're losing a bit of AP, you are getting HP for the item, which is very important for the top lane because it's giving you durability against these bruisers and fighters you're probably going to be against most of the time. So really in the laning phase, Cassiopeia is still one of the most dominant lane bullies we have. So in 12.3, if you see the enemy top laner locking a champion who's close range and doesn't have that much mobility who can really frighten you, it is time to take over the laning phase with Cassiopeia. Now coming in at number 4 for the most underrated champs at 12.3 is a champion who isn't getting buffed in 12.3. She actually got buffed in 12.2, and this is Diana. But I'm not talking about jungle Diana because we all know how good that champion is. She's picked and banned a lot in pro play at the moment, but I'm talking about Diana in the mid lane. Because to be honest, I just think this champion is really underrated. Because she counters a lot of popular champions you might see in the mid lane like Akali, Talon, Fizz. She does very well into all of these, and even if you don't win the laning phase, you bring so much to the party because of your Moonfall and your incredible team fighting ability. It's also very easy to land your Crescent Strike on a regular basis, so chipping away at the enemy champion's health bar until you can actually all in them with your Lunar Rush, it's a pretty scary champion to play against, and you have to have your wits about you. And also because your passive is dealing more damage now, so it's scaling off 50% of your AP rather than 40%. This is going to be really useful in the mid to late game once you do start getting AP from your items, and your damage against monsters is also up by 50%. This is going to stay the same in 12.3, so you can farm your junglers camps and you can take their blue buff. Just probably do it while they're dead so they don't tilt. So Diana in the mid lane, guards, with Rocket Belt, Shadow Flame, Sorcerer's Shoes. These 3 items are your core, and Shadow Flame at the moment is an item that is really overperforming on magic damage champions in the mid lane because of the magic penetration it gives you, and it also gives you a bit of tankiness because of the HP, so you're not going to hit the deck when you actually dive in there. So Diana comes in at number 4. But coming in at number 3 is a champion we just mentioned, and this is Talon. But not Talon in the mid lane, I'm talking about Talon in the jungle. Now, even though your Rake has been nerfed to the point where it's dealing 105% damage to monsters, the good news in 12.3 for Talon are all of the buffs that are coming into bruiser items. And if we cast our minds back to last season where Talon mains were building Gore Drinker as their mythic item instead of the lethality mythics, well, this is probably going to be the case next patch as well, because guess what? Gore Drinker is giving you 10 extra AD, It's also building out a cool Field's Warhammer and no longer a Phage, which is giving you ability haste, whereas Phage doesn't, so this is definitely an improvement. And even though you're losing 150 HP on the item, for any assassin champion who loves the attack damage, this is just unreal, and for Talon in the jungle, this is definitely going to be the case. So there is no doubt if these changes do actually hit the Rift, the Gore Drinker Talon will be back. But we also have to think about the other items you might consider building, whether it's Death's Dance to make use of the Gore Drinker extra attack damage, which gets pumped into Death's Dance healing passive, or whether it's the new Maw of Malmortius, which is scaling off your bonus AD once again. This is really going to benefit from all the extra attack damage in these items. And remember, just like I said for Ezreal, you're getting 12% Omnivamp when the shield procs, so not only are you going to deal more damage because these items are giving you more attack damage, but you'll also be staying alive for longer because of the lifesteal Maw of Malmortius is giving you. So Talon in the jungle, guys, will no doubt be revived in 12.3, so watch out for him. But beating him to the number 2 spot is a champion who for the entirety of Season 12 has been loving it, and to be honest has probably been the best AD carry in solo queue anyway for quite a while, and this is Vayne, but not as an AD carry. I'm talking about Vayne in the top lane, because if we think about next patch 12.3, what's probably going to happen, lots of bruisers and fighters are probably going to get played again because of the changes to their items. So we mentioned Cassiopeia before. One of her big strengths, just like Vayne, is that they are ranged champions and lane bullies. So before these bruisers and fighters actually get to their 2-3 item spikes, Vayne and Cass will be so far ahead because they pretty much never lose lane, unless you go full headbutt mode, which is a possibility, but we're talking generally here. Like for any top laner who plays melee champions, they might even ban champions like Vayne because it's very hard to win those matchups, and the actual windows you have to beat them, they are very small indeed. But that's not the only thing that's going for Vayne next patch. It's the fact that Blade of the Ruined King is also getting buffed. So even though it's costing an extra 100 gold, it's the fact that the on-hit damage based off the target's maximum HP, this is increasing by 2%. So if you are against one of these champions in the top lane who's going to be building a lot of HP, then my goodness, Vayne is going to be an unreal champion, and you might throw in some other champions here like maybe Jax and Aurelia, Blade of the Ruined King, attack speed users, but these aren't ranged champions. Vayne is, and that's why she holds the runner-up spot to the most underrated champion in 12.3. And just before we reveal who this is, guys, please, if you do enjoy these countdown videos, let us know by leaving a like down below. And the number 1 underrated champ for next patch, this is going to be Volleyball in the top lane. And the big reasons for this are the changes that are coming into Trinity Force and Steris Gauge. So Trinity Force is giving you an extra 100 HP, and this is really useful on Volleyball because the damage from your Frenzied Maw scales off your bonus HP, so this is really nice. And even though the 3-fold strike passive damage, this has been cut in half to 3%, Volleyball's base AD wasn't really that high anyway, so it's not the biggest loss in the world, and to be honest, you still have a lot of innate damage. It's really the tankiness you are missing, so this is definitely a buff. And then if we think about the new Steris Gauge, so the new passive says you're gaining 40% base AD as bonus AD, and think about this, for Volleyball, this is getting pumped again into your W. And the other change that's interesting to Steris is the fact that it's scaling the shield, that is, off your bonus HP, and because you're getting more from Trinity Force, and if we pair this with a Titanic Hydra, for example, this is going to be nuts, especially in the 1v1, 2v2 situations, which is where you really excel. And remember, if you were to go Titanic Hydra with Trinity Force and Steris Gauge, the bonus HP you're getting as well from your ultimate, this is going to convert into bonus AD as well because of Titanic Hydra's passive. So Volleyball, guys, for 12.3 takes the number 1 position, and I'd love to know your thoughts on the countdown and the champions we've included. Leave them in the comment section, and until tomorrow's daily Season 12 upload, guys, thanks so much for watching. This has been the Peace.